My name is Melinda Brown and I'm going to talk about my year as the 2017 Australasian Rolex Scholar for the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society. My year took me on over 70 flights to countries like Tonga to swim with the humpback whales, all the way down to South Australia to dive with great white sharks. So it really was a pretty incredible experience. Good evening everyone, and thank you Todd for the introduction. Also, I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone for coming, but especially to Todd for bringing me up here and making everything super easy. Thank you. So I was the 2017 Australasian Rolex Scholar for the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society. And the first time I think I had to officially announce that title for myself, I messed it up because it's quite a long title. But basically, for those of you that don't know what the scholarship is, it's an opportunity for young people in the underwater world to pursue their dreams in their field, whether it's science, photography, even dive medicine. Basically, for a year we get to travel and do whatever we please, really, as long as it's to do with our field. So I am going to talk about a few things tonight, but first I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. So who am I, or who was I before I was so Rolexy with my Rolex hat and my Rolex watch? I was not always this person. So I grew up obviously having a fascination with the ocean, and I always wanted to study it and I always wanted to be around it. But going into the field of marine science is quite a daunting thing. When you start your degree, people are sort of like, oh, aren't you scared that you're never going to get a job? Or, you know, you're going to end up laying in a pile of your broken dreams with your mouth filled with the bitter taste of failure. But I persevered, and I managed, after working overseas in a few different positions to do with coral rehabilitation, I managed to get a full-time position at Taronga Zoo, where I did research with the rescued and rehabilitated sea lions and penguins. And that led me to the scholarship. Wow. So the big question for me during my scholarship year was whether I was going to follow a master's in cetacean ethology, which is the study of whale and dolphin behaviour, or in coral biology. So that was something I already had a background in. Now, getting into both of these fields can be quite difficult, so the scholarship was the perfect platform for me to do that. Now, before I get to what is known as the battle royale of coral versus whales, I did a lot of things with the scholarship that were not necessarily related to those two fields, but were still equally as important. So the first thing I did, one of the first things I did as a scholar, was that I went to South Australia to join Rodney Fox on the Rodney Fox Shark Expeditions boat to dive with the great white sharks. My first trip there, I will be honest, was not fantastic. This is a little video of the weather conditions. So we're at anchor here. On the way out to the islands, we had about a 5 metre swell, 40 knot winds. This is me with 50 layers on, scrubbing a dirty tuna bucket, and there were no sharks. So my spirits were low to begin with. We did get sharks on that trip. This is Charlie. He's pretty impressive. They do a lot of research there, and that's how we knew who this shark was, which was really incredible. I went back down a second time and had a much better trip. The sea lions down there were amazing, the sharks are really good, and then I went back a third time for the Nikon Shark Shootout and came runner-up in their underwater category. So that was pretty special. I also went to Tahiti and I had the absolute privilege of diving in the Whakarava Passage. It's not a swear word, that's what it's called. The place is called Whakarava. Anyway, the grouper spawn, I think there's about 20,000 grouper there, and they all get together in this one tiny passage, and there's 700 sharks that just cruise up and down this one tiny bit of ocean. And this photo doesn't do it justice, but you just sit on the coral walls and just watch the sharks go past, and the grouper, it's like swimming through soup. It's absolutely incredible. There were also manta rays there, which was the first for me, so that was pretty special. I also ventured to Fiji, to the Banga Adventure Divers, also known as BAD. And they run Shark Reef, which is a marine reserve for the sharks there. And we got pretty up close and personal with them. This shark, it's not missing its teeth. It might look like it is, but it's just sort of hiding them because it's just cruising past. So while we were there, we planted 100 mangroves. That's why we have got our Rolexes very dirty in this photo, to try and offset our carbon footprint. Because during my year as a scholar, I caught around 70 flights in a year. So my carbon footprint is massive. In Fiji as well, if you ever go and do this dive and you're very lucky, you may get to go in what's called the hole. Now, it doesn't sound like a pleasant experience, but no one ever wants to leave the hole once they get in the hole. It's basically a big hole in the coral, and you sort of shimmy down in there with your scuba gear on, with just your head and your camera hanging out, and the sharks just cruise around you. So I was just in the hole, and these sharks would come right up and they'd sort of bump into your camera and check you out, and it's like being on their level completely. It's amazing. I also went to Utila to do some whale shark research. Now, this is another area I spent a month there, and I think it poured rain every day, flooded. So doing whale shark research is quite difficult. We still maintained the coral gardens and did coral research while we were there. But we got out one day and we got a whale shark, so that was amazing. We used the same program that NASA uses to identify like star constellations, so you can apply that to the spots on the sharks, and that helps you identify individuals. So by getting different shots, we're able to put it into the program and we can tell who they are. Utila, as beautiful as it was, had a massive problem though, and that was plastic. So although I did see some beautiful things on my year, I also saw some absolutely heartbreaking things, and this was one of them. So this beach, we would do a beach clean every week, and we would spend hours just digging this plastic out, and it was the most depressing thing I think I've ever done, because I honestly felt like I was not making a difference. Now, turtles are supposed to nest in Utila, they're supposed to nest on these beaches, but there is no way that they could dig through the plastic, and if they do, their young aren't going to make it. We would pile the driftwood up, we would pick up plastic, we would, in the same spot, pile the driftwood up, and we'd have to do that 6, 7, 8 times until you see sand, and when you see sand, it's full of styrofoam, there's no sand. So that was really quite a devastating thing. But happier times involved Sylvia Earle. I don't know if anybody here knows Sylvia. She's a bit of an ocean hero, Sylvia, and one of my personal heroes. So I went to Celebrate the Sea in Manado. It's a big diving festival, and I got to meet Sylvia on my 25th birthday, and she gave me a present. She gave me these blue sunglasses and told me that the world shouldn't be viewed through rose-coloured glasses, it should be viewed through blue, because that's the colour of the ocean. I entered a photo competition there while I was there as well, and I came runner-up in the black and white category, so this was my image with that, yeah. So, to increase my experiences throughout the year, I had to develop my diving a little bit. So when I started this scholarship, I was already a dive master, and I sort of, as a PADI dive master, I thought, I know what I'm doing when I'm diving, but I was wrong. So one of the first things I did was my nitrox course, which I did with Dive Centre Manly, so any locals might recognise Shelley Beach there. And then I went to Bali to do a freediving course. So I did that with Adam Stern, and while I was there on my 3rd day, I reached a depth of 30 metres on a single breath. So my freediving developed really quickly, but there was one thing that just didn't develop for me, and if anyone's got any tips on blowing bubble rings, I just can't do it, like I'm just useless. So, as you can see, they're quite poorly formed. But yeah, so always up for tips on blowing bubble rings, because that was not something I learnt during my year. I also went to Dive Centre Bondi and completed a GUE fundamentals course. Now, again, I was a bit like, I'm a dive master, I know how to stay in trim and I know how to dive, but they made me swim back and forwards on a 10 metre line for hours critiquing my stroke. Like my ankles were too high, they were too low, my knees weren't together enough, everything. But by the end of this, my diving level was just through the roof. I mean, I could sit in perfect trim, I could inflate my whatever, I could do everything basically in perfect trim. If anyone is a beginner diver, I cannot recommend this GUE course enough because it completely changed the way I dive. I also went to Tasmania, where I now live. I fell in love with it down there, to do my scientific diving course, which is a commercial certification, my ADAS level 1 essentially, where I got to use a lot of fun gear like this full face mask, which made me feel a little bit like a Bond girl, real like bad going diving. But it was also my first time diving in blackout dives, so we were going down in, I think the water was 12 degrees. I was middle of summer, I was in a dry suit, just going down and building things underwater that we couldn't see, or they'd take our mask off us and make us build something. And it's quite stressful really, but again, I think it really improved my diving. So that brings us to the coral, finally. So my coral journey began, it was actually my first project as a scholar, where I joined the Ocean Agency. Has anyone seen Chasing Coral? Yeah, you should watch it if you haven't seen it. So I joined Richard Vivers from Chasing Coral in Palau, where we were using 360 virtual reality degree technology to basically document the reefs, and then we would take it to local villages and schools and give them the virtual reality headsets and show them what was in the ocean. So we were putting this big thing in the water in all sorts of conditions, and then like swimming along the reef with it, and it would basically create the virtual reality thing. But we also use this method, and this is me having a go at it. Mine was not as good as everyone else's. But you essentially swivel the camera around 360, take 6 photos, and then you stitch them all together on a program, and then you can put those glasses on and you can turn in a circle and see basically what I saw. But I hadn't done my GUE course at this point, and I think my fins were in some of the photos, so yes. This is Steve Linfield. He is an ex-scholar. He housed me while I was there, and we had a lot of fun together showing the kids the virtual reality. I mean, some of them, you know, the only time they see a turtle is when it's pulled up to be fished, or maybe it pops its head out because they don't have access to snorkels and masks and things, so they can't see them. After that, I went to Thailand, back to a conservation dive school where I did my dive master, and they have some really incredible coral projects happening there. So this was one of their bottle nurseries, and I went there to help with their electrified reefs. So you basically go and find little bits of coral fragments and things that may have broken off, and you hitch them with string to these structures which have a limestone-based cement coating them and an electric current run by an underwater generator pulsing through it to increase coral growth. Because coral grows very slowly. For those that don't know, some coral only grow 1 centimetre, 2 centimetres a year. So, you know, as it's being destroyed, it's really hard for it to repair itself, so this sort of gives it a boost. Again, I sort of went into this experience being like, I've tied coral to this structure before, but I was actually had tied myself to the structure in that photo, so it was not as good as I thought it was. The main reason I went there though was for this. So this is a confusing picture, but this is a mushroom coral. So for anyone who's gone diving before, you see these corals on the bottom of the ocean floor that look like a big mushroom, and they are one polyp. So normally a coral, like a branching coral, is made up from a colony of polyps. This is just one big polyp. So that slit down the middle is its mouth, and that thing hanging out the side of it is a sea slug. Now, I'm sure most of you don't think of coral as a sea slug eating organism, but it does. And so in Thailand, they discovered that some of their mushroom corals were actually eating sea slugs. So the sea slug would go up over the coral, and it can it has tentacles. They're not out in that photo, but it puts little tentacles out, and it pulls a sea slug up to its mouth, and they pull it in and they eat it. And if they don't like it, they spit it back out. It's very wasteful. But I went there to help them with that project and to see sort of what they were finding, because it's quite a novel study. That was the end of coral for me. So this is where things got quite interesting. I went to Tonga with Scott Patelli to help him with the Tongan Flute Collective and some coral gardening. and to basically just be in the water and around the humpback. So this is me with a big girl. They're just incredible. Like, the noises sound like farts sometimes, but when you're in the water and you've got that whale underneath you singing and it's vibrating through your chest, it's vibrating through your whole body, it's like something else. It's so hard to explain, but this male was just singing for probably about 2 hours to a girl who was not interested in him, but he was still trying. So good on him. Yeah. While I was there, I had a lot of incredible experiences like that whale, but this girl was probably the best experience I had while I was there. So she basically hung in the water for 2 days with her tail out, completely out of the water, and just hung vertical. Every 20 minutes she'd surface, have a breath, and she'd go back to hanging. And she's been documented a few years in a row doing this behaviour in pretty much the same spot. And shortly after, she's often seen with a calf. So they potentially think that this could be a behaviour they do maybe before they give birth. Maybe she's uncomfortable with how the calf's sitting, maybe it's relaxing for her. But we were able to get quite close to her. And this is a really good example of size. I don't think the size of them is often comparable to us, but this photo is a really good example of that. But that's just the fluke, and that's Scott in the water. We're all on the other side of that whale. But they're absolutely incredible. After Tonga, I wanted to do a little bit more hard science, I guess, to do with cetaceans. So I went all the way to Scotland to work with dolphins, which seems ridiculous, but it was amazing. So these dolphins in the Moray Firth are the biggest dolphins in the world, bottlenose dolphins essentially, because they are the most northern population. So they have to be quite robust to survive in those cold waters. This is one of the boys, I think it was llama, that one. But while we were there, we also saw minke whales, which was another. Honestly, I was so lucky to be there at that time because we'd been driving around in a boat for 8 hours, all dressed in dry suits like this because it's so cold. Just looking, we had seen nothing, and our spirits were a bit low, and then all of a sudden our leader, Kevin, yells out, "Whale!" And all the girls just jumped up. I think I wasn't asleep at that point, but someone else was asleep on the ground, and everyone jumps up and into action. And these minke whales were lunge feeding, which is super rare to see in the Moray Firth. And whales and dolphins have what's called lateralisation of the brain. Everyone in this room has it, and it essentially means that they're left and right-handed. So for most whales, they are right-handed. So when they lunge feed, they'll roll to the side that they prefer, in much the same way that if we were pushed, we would step forward with that same foot. So both of these whales are right-handed. They were using, minke whales have one white fin that they use to flash the fish to sort of scare them into their mouth. And we were able to witness that for about 2 minutes until the whales saw our boat and decided we were more interesting and came and just sat under our fish finder. So it was completely red, and we were sort of like, "Go away, we want to study you." And then they'd come up right next to us and look at us and then go back under, and ruined our study. How dare they? But another thing happened that I promised Colin I would talk about. I don't know where he is. While I was in Scotland with the dolphins. Now, everyone thinks dolphins are friendly and lovely, but I can assure you they are not. They're sadistic and awful. They're just absolute creeps, all of them. So we were with these 3 boys, one of the ones that was jumping in the air, and we assumed they were male because the males hang out in trios normally. And they were quite young dolphins. And the guy I was working with, Kevin, said to me, "Oh, do you want to jump in the water, Mel, with the GoPro and see if you can get a photo of their genitals so we know that they're definitely boys?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, that sounds fun. I'll get in the water." These dolphins have probably never seen people in the water. I don't think people swim in this part of the world because it's so cold. So I jumped in the water, and the dolphins are sort of circling me, getting closer and closer. I'm more and more confident. Then they start buzzing me, and I'm videoing them with my GoPro, and you can hear me screaming and carrying on. And then they start buzzing me, getting closer and closer, and they've all got their appendages out. So I was yelling at them like, they're males. But at the same time, I'm like, that's a really big display of dominance, basically. It's a really big, like, get out, girl. And so I didn't get out because the boat was laughing at me and they were all like, ah, ha, ha, ha. And I was like, get me out of the water. And then the dolphins went underneath me and did what's called a bubble net. So they swam a circle underneath me while exhaling, which created a screen of bubbles so I could no longer see them. And that's what they do when they're going to capture a female to mate with. So at that point, I was really, really yelling for help. I got out of the water in time. It's all good, but it was a close call. So watch out for dolphins. I named one dolphin Rolex while I was there as well, which I thought was hilarious. And then I went to Wales to do more dolphin work with the Cardigan Bay Marine Wildlife Centre, and I named another dolphin Rolex. So there's 2 dolphins in the UK called Rolex, and my dream is for them to meet and be friends, but they won't. So my dolphin journey continued. That down in Wales was also again very cold. I had about 50 layers on. We spent a lot of time standing on this wall just watching for the dolphins and taking ID shots to do population studies. But it was really, really rewarding standing on that freezing cold wall because down in Wales, those dolphins are so famous. Everyone loves them. People go on holidays to this place to come and see the dolphins. Like, we take them for granted swimming up and down our beach, but here they just love them so much, and it was really awesome opportunity to stand there and be able to talk to the public about these amazing dolphins that they have. And people were quite interested in, how are they doing? Is the population growing? What's going on? What's threatening them? How can we help them? So it was a really good opportunity to have those conversations. I also, while I was in the UK, I went back to Scotland. This picture is irrelevant. This is where I wanted to be while I was doing what I was doing. I decided to do an ecological niche modelling course using the statistical analysis program R. For anyone in here that's ever used R, it's basically writing code to make it create a graph. And it's incredibly difficult. I cried myself to sleep most nights. I spent 5 days straight sitting on a laptop with a group of people just writing code, trying to learn how I can better model what I'm seeing in the wild. But yeah, it was very, very difficult. I also had the privilege of going on the Lindblad boat, which is sort of in partnership with National Geographic. And we went to Baja, Mexico, where one of, I think, the wildest things in the world happens. And it's where the grey whales come to have their babies. So they go into these lagoons along the coast of Baja and they have their calves, but they have this incredible history of bringing their calves up to people in boats to be patted and kissed, and it's like a tradition. I'd read all the books about it. It had been something I'd sort of been obsessing over for quite a while, but I wasn't quite convinced that it was voluntarily on the whale's part. I thought maybe it was a bit of a forced interaction, but it's not. So these whales, way back before whaling, would bring their calves up to the locals in their little canoes to be patted and scratched, and then good old white man got in there and whaled them and killed them all, and they were assumed to be extinct because they were so easy to catch, and within a few years they didn't see any, so they stopped going there. And as the whale population was able to rebuild itself, it was like the whales remembered. And these whales are responsible for quite a few deaths of people because people would go out in their canoes and these whales would just smash the canoes. And for a long time you couldn't really go in there. It was really dangerous, and they have, though, forgiven us and gone back to their old ways. This whale, her name's Olivia. They know that because they've ID'd her for 10 years. She's been coming here and having calves. She just floats in the water, and we just sit there in the boat and put our hands down and give her little tickles on her nose, and she just lays there with her eyes shut. So I imagine it to be the same as when someone, plays with your hair, or, quite relaxing. I was with the European scholar again, May. They pretty much had to kick us off the boat. We wouldn't leave. We refused. They carried our bags off. They pretty much had to carry us off. We had honestly had the best time. One morning we were doing yoga on the bow, and then there's this announcement like, "Good morning, everybody. Breakfast is ready." But there's also orcas off the bow if anyone wants to go and see them. And I think we just threw our yoga mats in the box and ran for the orcas. Didn't have breakfast that morning. But that experience led me on to the biggest I guess you could say, whale experience I had throughout my year, and that was with blue whales in Sri Lanka. So I went over there to work with National Geographic explorer Asher DeVos for a month. It was a very, very challenging month. And we collected fluke and another thing from these whales. So this is what we were searching for. This was like gold for us when we were out on the boat. This is blue whale poo. It's what the biggest animal that's ever existed on Earth's poo looks like. You're all welcome. So we were basically collecting that because then we would do and analyse it. And what the poo was showing was that these whales aren't actually eating krill. They're eating a little crustacean that eats krill. So they're like one step up the food chain. These whales also do what's called fluking. You often see humpback whales do it where they put their tail out of the water before they dive because they're going quite deep and it helps them angle down. And the only place in the world blue whales are supposed to do this is in Sri Lanka. I had a really good time there with the dolphins. And we had pilot whales as well, which was a first for me. We had, there would have been about 100 of them just milling around the boat, eyeballing us. There were some really big males in there that was sort of getting quite up close and personal with the boat. But as fun as it was, there were also a lot of realities that we sort of had to face. So this blue whale mum, as you can see, is right in the shipping lane. So one of the biggest shipping lanes in the world runs through those waters that these blue whales have got calves in. This mum had a calf with her. It's just, you can't see it there. But we spent quite a lot of time sort of with these mum and calves, like avoiding these massive ships that are going through and trying to get fluke shots. And with this one particular mum, we're really quite concerned about her and her calf in the shipping lane. And then we zoom in on the photos of her fluke and realise she's actually got fishing line wrapped around her as well, and she's trailing some fishing gear because we thought she looked a bit thin, and I guess that sort of explains it. So that was another big wake-up call, I guess, for me, that we have such a massive impact on the ocean in everything we do. Like clothes I buy in Australia probably come across on ships like this from other countries, and just, yeah, it's quite devastating. And that was the end of my whale journey. So I'll give you all one guess as to what I am now following my career path in. But my future, I guess, was decided for me during that time. I accepted a master's offer while I was hanging out with the whales in Mexico. So I'm now studying a Masters of Marine and Antarctic Science down in Tasmania, which I'm loving every second of except for the cold weather. And yeah, there's none of this diving down there because the water is very murky. But I'm still managing to get in the water with whales down there. I snuck in with a mum and calf southern right whale a few weeks back, which was pretty amazing. But yeah, big thank you. I obviously had a lot of sponsors throughout this year who made it all possible for me. So of course, a big thank you to them, and thank you for listening.